Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. Hana Sharif took over as the artistic director of the Repertory Theatre of St. Louis in September. And since that time, the company has won raves for its productions of Angels in America and The Lifespan of a Fact. Its world premiere of a play called Feeding Beatrice at its smaller studio theater was extended due to audience demand. So Sharif's tenure is off to a great start. But her biggest test happens in 2 weeks. That's when the first Repertory Theatre production directed by Sharif makes its debut. It's an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, and Hana Sharif is here with us today to discuss it. Hana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Hana, you have a long history with this particular play. Tell us, you started your journey with Pride and Prejudice, the play, back in Connecticut?
I did. So I commissioned this play in Hartford, Connecticut during my years at Hartford Stage and did several years of development on the play. And then I was really fortunate to be able to direct the world premiere actually at my new home in Baltimore about 5 years ago. So this is an adaptation that was commissioned and developed with great love with the magnificent playwright Christopher Baker, who's as passionate about Jane Austen's work as I am. And then to be able to see that play take its full revolve and have a world premiere production, which was incredibly exciting. And it has been close to my heart for many, many years and felt like just the right entry point for my work as an artist in this community.
Now, there have been many beloved cinematic adaptations of this novel, but prior to this play that you helped commission back in the day, I'm not aware of any theatrical versions. Why do you think that is?
Well, there are others. There are about 19, actually, theatrical versions. There are hundreds of adaptations of Jane Austen's work. And I think part of it is the fact that Jane Austen has created these incredibly smart, charismatic, memorable women, heroines, who are living and existing in a world that they're slightly out of step with. And I think that there's something about that connect and disconnect that resonates, that's timeless and resonates with many of us. I was first introduced to Jane Austen's work when I was 12. The first book I read was Sense and Sensibility, followed by Pride and Prejudice. And then I needed to read all of her canon. And I did find myself in these women who had ideas that were larger than what society told them they should have, and these dreams and ambitions and challenges. And I think it makes for great drama. Sweeping romances. I am a huge fan of many of the cinematic versions.
Which is your favorite?
My favorite, I'm aging myself or dating myself, but the 1995 version with Colin Firth, I think, is probably one of the best adaptations, cinematic adaptations. I recently saw the Pride and Prejudice Zombies, which was not quite my cup of tea, but I think it's a testament to the passion in many different genres people have for Jane Austen's stories and these really memorable, familiar characters that have been able to span, 200 years.
So as you say, there are these other versions of this play out there, even though I had not been familiar with them. They're clearly going on with other companies. What made you think, we actually need a different version? The world needs a 19th.
Well, I think that every playwright has a very specific entry point for a story. And Austen's novels are really quite dense. And so there are some adaptations that I found tried to take in too many of the subplots and made for a less enjoyable patron experience. There's another very popular adaptation that's a little tongue-in-cheek and takes liberties that are exciting and fun, but less traditional. And I was really interested, and the playwright Christopher Baker, when he talked about his vision for the story, really interested in an adaptation that would be familiar to everyone, that the purists would appreciate and love, but also leaned in with a 21st century sensibility. So it is certainly a period piece, but I think that the language of it speaks to us in profoundly contemporary ways. And we had a moment in rehearsal last week where we hit a scene and one of the actors went, "This is amazing." He synthesized 3 chapters of the book in 4 pages in a way that is so clear, emotionally compelling, and propels the story forward.
Wow, that is hard to do.
It's a really hard task, but that's part of why I wanted to work with this writer. And I thought that there was something really special that he could do and deliver us the essential story, Austen's story, in a way that would resonate with everyone.
And so in terms of those modern audiences, what did you do, or what are some ways that you had to rework the material to make sure that it just didn't feel fusty to somebody who's maybe not this devoted Austen fan and sort of understands the modernity of her characters?
Well, I think that one of the things that's so great about Austen's work is that the characters themselves are so full of life and energy, and their inner monologue is timeless. And so for us, it was leaning into the inner monologue and really looking at what was happening at the turn of the 19th century that created the challenges that birthed the angst and the tension of the story, and then finding what that mirrors in the 21st century.
That's so interesting. Give us some idea. So what was happening at that period of time that you see the modern resonance with?
Well, I think that there was a evolution of industry. There was a political evolution happening at the time. And we found, in particular with the women in Austen's stories, that they were trapped in a society that had very strict rules around the possibilities of their lives, what progress would look like, and how they would have independence and agency. And that there was a tension between women who were pushing against the walls of the world, but also forced to work within them. And I think that as we look in the 21st century at questions that one would 2 decades ago would think we wouldn't be looking at as women in this contemporary society, I think that we're still finding ourselves pushing against the fold of wanting to have independence and agency, and rules and strictures of society that question that or that create tension for us. And so I think that there are some really compelling synergy between the challenges that the characters in Jane Austen's world were facing and what we faced. They're not the same, but they resonate in a deeply impactful and familiar way.
And I heard that you also have somewhat of a modern soundtrack. Is that the case with this production?
It is true. Now, this is where the purists may say, wait a minute, that's not... I am a huge fan of contemporary music. I love the idea, especially in this period, of blending. Jane Austen has a wonderful songbook collection that many purist Austenites are familiar with. And so I like the idea, and I'm working with this brilliant sound design and composition team. So all of the music in the show has been composed for this production.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing. And we spent a lot of time talking about how we root the music in Jane Austen's songbooks, but then push in a really contemporary way. And so there are some very contemporary bass lines, and there's a little bit of electronica at times that comes in. And it's a lot of fun, and I think the sound certainly does feel like a 21st century sound. But anyone who's a true Austenite will hear the melodies and the melodic lines of 19th century
This
music.
sounds kind of like what Sofia Coppola was doing with Marie Antoinette. Is that sort of the idea?
I would definitely say that I'm a huge fan of that movie, and I think that that type of synergy between the old world and new world is really compelling. And I think that that's also part of how we can make these stories contemporary and new. And so, yes, if you've seen that movie, then you won't be surprised when you hear the energy of the sound.
So that might be a warning for some of our listeners who are going to come in expecting everything to be completely traditional. It sounds like this is going to be so true to the text, but that we're also going to notice how it resonates in a modern way.
I think when you walk into the theater, you'll be blown away by the beauty of the world. The set is extraordinary, and it's also created by St. Louisan. Scott Bradley is our set designer. We've worked together for many years, and this will be his first show back in St. Louis since he left in high school many, many years ago. But brilliant set designer. It's got all of the glam and the sparkle that one would expect from a 19th century romance. The costumes are gorgeous. So if you're coming to be swept away into the 19th century world of the ton, you're definitely going to find yourself satisfied with Pride and Prejudice. And then you'll get to lean into a little 21st century sound.
So the music is new for this production. It
Yes.
sounds like the set is completely new for this production. Has the text changed at all since the version that you mounted in Baltimore?
Yes, this is actually there are some Christmas surprises in our production that were not part of the original production. When I knew that we were going to be playing in this slot over the holidays, I called my dear friend, the playwright, and said, wouldn't it be great if we could have the last ball happen at Christmas and perhaps we could have a little treat for our audiences? And he was totally game to revisit. So, in fact, our audiences here in St. Louis will be the first audience to see this version of the script.
Wow, that is exciting.
Yes.
Now, you've had a few Elizabeth Bennetts from Connecticut to Baltimore, now to St.
Yes.
Louis. What does your St. Louis actress bring to this role?
I think that Katie Kleiger, who is brilliant and beautiful and nuanced, has such a compelling energy. She is able to bring forward the sense of Elizabeth Bennet's wit, this sense of being well-liked, but also the smartest woman in the room, someone who's not met her match. I think that she is able to deliver I know we've used the term tension, but also the sense of dissatisfaction with the state of the world that she's in while still blooming, while still blossoming, while still sharing her joy. And I think that it's a really hard thing to be able to carry the complexity of the tension and the nuance and the joy. And I think that she does it with great aplomb.
Now, bigger picture, this is your first year here
Yes.
at the Rep, and you had said in some other interviews that you wanted to spend this, your first year in St. Louis, as a year of listening.
Yes.
So how's that going so far?
It's been an exciting start. We've had several productions that have really been well received.
They really have. I mean, these are raves.
They've been great. And also what we've been able to do is partner and collaborate with different organizations on each of the productions. So as we've created these partnerships, it's been a great opportunity for me to get to know other organizations in the city, to get to know who their constituents are. So with Angels in America, we partner with Urban Chestnut in the Grove.
That's a great partner. Get a brewery in there.
Yes. I mean, what says St. Louis? Like the breweries. But we also partnered with renowned local artist Kubabi Bayak. And commissioned him to do a 200 square foot mural to commemorate Angels in America, which is on the Manchester facing side of Urban Chestnut. And it's a beautiful mural. We've got Instagram is filled with people stopping and taking their pictures with their own angel wings in front of it. And that's one that will be a lasting commemoration of that partnership. And another major a collaboration we did during Angels in America is we partnered with Dr. Madi Davis, who is a clinician in WashU's Infectious Disease Center. And she did a presentation called U equals U, looking at the reality of HIV and AIDS in the 21st century. And it was a powerful and impactful conversation. And I would say 50% of the people who came out for that conversation were patrons who'd seen the show. And success for me was that 50% of the people who came out for that conversation had not seen the show and had never been in our doors before. They came out because there was an important community conversation happening, and we were creating the space and access for that conversation to happen. And that we had this moment where the art on stage, the theme of the art on stage, was actually elevated to be create a meaningful space of healing and sharing for the larger community. And I believe fundamentally, in terms of our responsibility and access, that it is an important part of the work that we do at the Rep, and it certainly will be something you'll see more of.
So that's, you're getting these people through the door, that's the first challenge.
Yeah.
Second challenge, then, how do you get them to come back, for them to say, yeah, Pride and Prejudice, this is going to speak to me too? Do you see that as directly translating in that way?
Not necessarily directly translating in that way. I think that it's about an invitation to the party. when people ask me, well, how do we expand audiences? And I say, well, the first step to expanding an audience is actually having a meaningful relationship with the communities that you want to bring in. So if you want young people to come to the theater, then you have to form a meaningful relationship. You've got to be able to connect and create work that's relevant to them. You have to show an interest, and you have to create an invitation, not just to one party, but to all of our parties. And so I think that it's a long game in that way, and that the more we listen and hear and allow that information to help inform the way we move forward, the greater relevancy we're going to have within our community. And I think that while the shows that we put on stage and driving an audience to them is incredibly important, I'm in this business because I think that art can transform lives, and that ultimately this is about the elevation and the introduction and the embracing of our own humanity and the humanity of others. And sometimes that happens because you sit in the seat and watch a play, and sometimes it happens because you meet us at an education activity in a park, and sometimes it happens because you come into an important community conversation being hosted. But the end result of all of those opportunities is a sense for you to see yourself and to see the humanity in the person next to you. And that's the work. That's the spiritual work. That's the community work that I'm interested in. And that's the reason that I'm an artist. And so I think that we have a great opportunity with the platform that the Rep has to really be a change agent in this community and to be a space for difficult discourse and healing.
So the New York Times reported that women have been named to 41% of the 85 artistic director jobs at big theaters like the Reps.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, that's since 2015. And people of color are actually 26% of that same cohort. So do you feel like you're almost part of a national movement here where you're sort of changing things up and almost taking over these previously stodgy institutions?
I would say stodgy is your word, not my word.
And that is absolutely true. And that was not directed at the Rep in particular, but in terms of bigger theaters.
Yes, I would offer that we are witnessing a transformation of leadership in our field that heretofore was unprecedented. In the 70 years that there's been the American Regional Theater, we've never seen a transition of leadership like this. And a lot of it is really about a retirement bubble. Many of the folks, like my predecessor, who has admirably served this community for 34 years, was retiring. And so there are a number of artists in my generation who have been working within the regional theater movement for 15, 20, 22 years and are excited to be able to take what we've learned about the evolution of the theater and to really vision forward a new way forward. And part of it is because there are legitimately systemic issues that we face as a field, problems that have to be solved. And so I'm in active conversation with most of those new leaders. We have.
Are you guys all on a group text?
We've got group texts. We've got email chains. We get together for lunches at national conferences and share ideas. And I do think that might be part of if I were going to look back at what I've witnessed as a artistic leader in the last 20 years, as someone who supported as an associate artistic director for many years at multiple institutions, that one of the differences I would say with previous leadership and this new generation is that we are all really openly, actively working together to solve problems, not just for the field, but in our own institutions. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of it is really that the ability to be able to lean on each other is a gift that was given to us in the sense that the first women to come into these positions did not have as many peers to lean on and to look for support. Mm-hmm. And they were really breaking that first round of glass ceilings for us. And so we were able to learn by watching, learn from working with them and their male colleagues. And I think that one of the things we realized is that it isn't weak to be able to say, I'm facing these big challenges. How are you facing these challenges? And for us to share information that it actually will make all of us stronger and our institutions weather the storms of the political and financial and all of the things that every major theater is facing and most cultural institutions. And so there is a sense of us working together and leveraging our combined brilliance to solve these issues.
I love that phrase, combined brilliance.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be the bigger challenge going forward for artistic directors like yourself to attract these new audiences that you're really earnestly seeking out, or to not alienate the older audiences that are still there and might be a little averse to mixing things up too much?
I think in truth, the real issue that we're all facing, that question gets to the heart of, is really what's the financial model to support nonprofit theater in the 21st century. And it's a bigger question than can we keep our patron base and build a new audience. The answer is we don't have an option. We've got to be able to retain our core audience because they've been underwriting the American theater for many, many years. And we also have to be able to bring in a new audience. Otherwise, the theaters will die because they won't be sustainable because there won't be an audience. And right now, I would say across the country, what we see is a missing generation of audience. If I were to talk to most of my patrons, I think that they've been coming to the theater for 30 or 40 years, which means that they started coming to the theater, in their late 30s, early 40s. And if you ask many of them if their children who are in that age group come to the theater, most of them will say no.
So that Gen X component is the
right
missing
now
generation.
is right now missing from the regional theater. They're finding their way into theater, but not necessarily the largest theaters in the country. And then you see actually this younger generation of early 20s who are starting to peek their heads back into the regional theater. And so I think that we've got to find a way to attract the missing generation, and we've got to find a way to make our homes relevant and important and a vital part of the conversation for our communities for this younger generation. And I think it's a legacy project, right? In terms of not wanting to alienate our traditional audience, I think that the audiences that have been here are passionate about our theaters. And I would speak to all of our patrons and say that I'm in this because I believe in building on the legacy of those who came before me. And I want their help in doing that here in St. Louis. I want to know how we can all work together to make sure that the theater that you have loved for 20, 30, and 40 years has another 40, 50, 60 years to make great work, classics and new work, and to serve audiences. And how do we get this next generation to be as passionate about the work as you are?
Hana Sharif, Artistic Director of the Repertory Theatre of St. Louis. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been great.
And Pride and Prejudice opens in the first week of December.
Yes,
so, yes.
Please come out.
I don't know if this is appropriate to say to a director, but break a leg.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.